Good. Oh, and we're 11:05. Thanks. Okay. Hello, I'm Angela Wheeler, and I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about my background, just why I'm up here talking about SDS authoring strategies. Then what's in it for you? So hopefully get you thinking about ways that you can, you may not even be an SDS author, but if you're producing products, you need to know what good looks like. And we've been coaching some of our clients to do that. And I'll try to share a bunch of scenarios that we've been through or I've been through in my career. I'm going to talk about the SDSs in GHS format. So they're compliant with WHMIS 2015, also compliant with HASCOM 2012. So that's the US version. I've got a bunch of things to note, so you can write down whatever suits your operations. I talked about sampling strategy, some international considerations. So there's lots of information here. I try to leave you 3 things, and yeah, you'll have more than 3 things. I won't harp on anything, but I'm hoping you take something away. I hope to have half the time for questions. So feel free to type them in, and when we get to the end, we can just run into that. So there is a recording, and that'll be available afterwards. Maureen's going to handle that, so I'll get going. There we go. So I like this photo. I see how the road worms its way. Sometimes it veers off. Hold on. Sorry, I've got to looking at myself there. I often feel like I'm taking a detour, but I bet someday my path will look quasi-straight like this. I was introduced to SDSs in undergrad chemistry back in the 90s. So labels and WHMIS training were the emphasis then. No one actually read the documents, the SDSs. Not so different from now, but then as a keen occupational hygienist in grad school, we had to write one from scratch. We were told it had to give the worker information on the hazards. So later as a consultant, I wrote SDSs for various clients that needed to ship their products across the country and internationally. And then later, again, consulting, working in the asbestos litigation projects, I had to summarize stacks of court testimonies on exposure profiles, and it gave me proof that how little workers were told about the hazards that they were working with. Then at Synovus, I had a product stewardship role, and I maintained the SDS for their products. I worked with the traders and the marketing engineers, developed a sampling strategy for operators. And while I was there, I earned that the designation for SDS authoring. It's quite new. It was rolled out in 2013, just like any other designation, really. You have to show that you understand the body of knowledge, you've been working in the field, and you write a practical test. And then you maintain it every year with development and authoring. And so at that time in 2014, I was only one of 3 Canadians who had that designation, and I've been working with SDSs ever since. I think that, and you'll see it come through, I think that competency in SDS authoring is essential. And many of our clients have said that too, mirrored the comments. Angela, how come the program points out, our software points out inconsistencies in the SDS writing? But as you know, there's designation, but anyone can write one. So up to, and then I pass the baton to you. Whether you're an author or not, it's important for you, if you're in a position to handle those chemicals or approved chemicals, that you understand what a good SDS looks like. And it does come down to the employer to inform workers of the hazards. So if they have a poor SDS, that information just gets repeated down the line. I totally encourage you to challenge your suppliers. I have had SDSs come across my desk, and there's multiple symbols in there, repeated symbols or the wrong symbols, because I understand the chemistry of it, and I push back, and many try not to do the work for them because, like I said, I've done that consulting in the past, but I definitely want the best hazard information for my workers, and I'll ask them to update it. And you'll see some of them will call it an MSDS, and they're not in the GHS format or over and above. And our software, again, also point that out. So feel free to advocate for your workplace. Testing the product is another thing. If you manufacture a product, definitely get tests done so that you understand the flammability, the corrosivity, the pH, boiling point, vapor pressure, things like that, depending on the characteristics of your manufactured product. Back in the day, SDSs could just be rubber stamped and or copied and pasted from other things, but we're in a time now that testing a product is essential to get the proper classification. And then a note to you as well is document the process. Like any audit will tell you, if it isn't documented, it doesn't count. You want to be able to show a regulator, your workers that and your suppliers, any of your clients, customers, that you have a process for updating your SDS, for creating your SDS, and for management of change. So that's my into the background. WHMIS 2015, it was when we moved from WHMIS 1988 to the new GHS. And when we did that in Canada, we adopted the revision 5. US also adopted revision 5. It's a 16 section format. Historically, so I've always written 16 section SDSs, because in my day it was an ISO standard, but so this is an evolution of the rigor we've put into SDSs. So 16 sections. The last 4 are optional. You need the headings in there, but the information just isn't enforced by Health Canada or the regulatory body. Even Transport Canada, it's a great, Section 14 is a great way to find the transport information, but Transport Canada doesn't regulate an SDS. So just I like the fact that SDS, people understand where to look, but just to let you know that, yeah, Transport Canada thinks that their shipping document is the proper place for that information, and the SDS is backup. Key sections for workers. Now, I was coaching another colleague, and just trying to explain to her, it's a long document. What really matters, and what it's a good, from as a safety professional, it's good to think of the SDS from the eyes of the worker. We try to. As an author, we try to put a lot of information into the SDS, but when we transmit that to the worker, we're trying to pop out certain information. So the product identification, understanding that one product is just different from another. By this title, even if it has the same title, it'll have a different manufacturer. So the understanding of that different, the product identifiers. The hazard identification, that goes into the symbols, the classification, the big one. First aid, accidental release, self-explanatory. Handling and storage, yeah. How are we going to prep to handle this stuff? Exposure controls. Yeah, it's the realm of hygiene and safety. Exposure controls are, I was thinking in my talks, but yeah, exposure controls, again, how they're going to handle that product safely. And then optionally disposal and transport, thinking a bit down the road when you have to get rid of this stuff. So now I have a list, and I've pulled this from other trainings I've done, and really was a list. So yeah, forgive me all the words, and we'll just take it as she goes. A couple things. So point out, shout out for the SDS and Label Authoring Registry, as I said, and they have a list of SDS authors. So if you're looking to develop an SDS and you don't want to do it yourself, feel free to reach out to somebody on there, and I'll show at the end, but we do author SDSs through our sister company, Deerfoot, and many of our clients take advantage of that, and it's great. Provides some consistency, and they're really doing some interesting things with QR codes, so ask about that when you call up. Labels and safety data sheets must be updated when significant information is available for a chemical. And number 3, review your SDSs at least every 3 years. Now, this is a legacy item. It comes from pre-WHMIS 2015, and it was really something that many countries didn't adopt, and that rigor, but it has been maintained in BC and a couple of the territories. So it's a great best practice. So reviewing that every 3 years. Again, put that into your process management change. Purple book is the author's Bible and SDS Author's Bible, and it has flowcharts for classification. We're moving to revision 7. So we started at 5, we're skipping a few, and both US and Canada are moving to revision 7 within the COVID pushed everything out, but they were trying for this year and maybe next year, but keep that on the horizon. And we'll have Chemscape will have a diagram to that effect with the changes and such. Understand the substance and others like it. Now, this is, again, where you come into play, even if you're not authoring that SDS. Understanding what your products are is really good. Sometimes we get the tests taken at the lab, and lab is just doing the analysis you've asked for. You're the expert on your products, and you want an SDS author that also understands your substance, or not just fill in the blanks or using a computer program to fill in the different sections, the information. And when it comes back, even if you are getting it authored outside, verify that it meets those exposure controls and makes sense for your organization, for your industry. That's the value you add in the process. It's useful to review the SDS for similar products from reputable manufacturers. So when being a SDS author in the oil and gas, yeah, I'd line them up, BP, Exxon, all these. And that's a funny story. When just before the Bakken Lac-Mégantic antique explosion, a couple of years before that, I had written an SDS for sales oil that coming out of our Saskatchewan Bakken, and I called it Bakken crude. And I had all the data, and I got some backlash from the big guys. I got emails after they found my SDS, and I had made it a packing group 1, highest flammability from a TDG standpoint, and a GHS. They align. And so yeah, I was getting this hate mail, email saying crude is never packing group 1. And I'm like, I'm just going with the data. And I went to my supervisor and I said, look, these are coming from, reputable oil and natural gas manufacturers. She's like, hey, you've got your results. You've gone through your classification scheme. You got the designation. You go with it. Well, then Lac-Mégantic happened. And of course, Cenovus has the only SDS for Bakken crude. And I had all these regulators phoning me and asking me to talk about Bakken crude. And I'm like, oh, shouldn't have named my SDS Bakken crude. And anyway, you know what happened from that. And now the whole industry knows there's definitely packing group 1s out there. And we have new test methods. It's very important to review the SDS. You're not just reviewing your SDS, you're also reviewing how you sampled and how the regulations changed, like from revision 5 to revision 7. There'll be some classification shifts there. And depending on where what type of product you have, you want to be on top of that. So. Number 7, confirm consistency through the example between section 2 and 4. These things, once you have your classification, they feed through. So that section 2 is your classification, and it flows. It determines what you're going to say in section 4 through 7. So also, don't repeat H&P statements or pictograms. Simplify as much as you can. There's a rule of precedence that I'll go into, and definitely that's more of a cut and paste errors, and yeah, you don't want that. Oh, and then precedent rules for signal words. You don't want, there's only 2 signal words, danger and warning. You don't want them both on your SDS. There's HMP statements, as I said before. They actually do add together. So that's something to simplify. And then the pictograms, and I'll go through that. There are, if you have carcinogen, you're not going to have the exclamation mark unless there's certain circumstances. If it's a aspiration hazard, there's a exclamation mark, but there's a hierarchy of the pictograms as well. So this is a good one. On number 10, because I've just gone through one of these. Important not to contradict or cast doubt on information required on the SDS label. So recently I had an SDS come through and it was coded for this may be harmful and toxic when inhaled. You can't be harmful and toxic. There's like I said, a gradation of hazard statements and precautionary statements. So there are rules, and that's where that purple book comes into play, and that's why these registered authors do what they do. SDS for a manufacturer. So SDSs are required for manufactured products, and when you sell them and ship them to clients, they need to be with the shipment or ahead of the shipment. There's also, I encourage you to do SDSs for byproducts and wastes. Now, depending on your jurisdiction, you may have other ways of dealing with waste, but an SDS helps. The SDS for your manufactured products, because we've come into that too, isn't necessarily the same as your waste. So you can't, depending on your waste, say you've got flammable liquid, and now you've got a flammable solid in the end because it's been mixed with your sand treatment facility. Now this is a solid, so that SDS for your liquid doesn't necessarily apply to your solid. Again, may require testing. And then intermediate products, stuff's in your pipes. You've blended all the ingredients together, and now that's an optional one. It provides hazard information for your contractors and your site crews if there is a release or taking samples, things like that. So I've done that as well. There's a funny one, boiler feed water. It's really condensation, really. It's a processed water that's heated up and blown off the top, but it did contain some salts and such, and it was collecting on the guys' trucks, and they felt that if it was collected on the trucks, it must be hazardous, and so it was non-hazardous. But by having an SDS, we could point to the SDS anytime that question came up and say, look, we've done the testing, we've done the classifications, it doesn't come up as hazardous. So something to think about. GHS, and then number 12, this is my last one. GHS does not require testing of chemicals. It's a guide to creating those SDSs. And the formats. However, manufacturers are permitted to test their products. Manufacturers must use the classification on the information about the chemical that is available. So anything you can collect, if your whole industry, that certain things are toxic, then you start putting that into your SDS. One of the hardest things I found was getting corrosive. So the bar for corrosivity in humans is animal testing. And as you can imagine, that's gone out of favor. Nobody wants to do it. I've even posted on internet sites, laboratory sites where people will take on certain projects for experimental purposes or research purposes, things like that. And yeah, just nobody wants to do it. So if you can pull that information from the body of knowledge that's already there, we have done a lot of animal testing in history. So that kind of thing's there. But again, document, and review when new information comes up, because we're always doing better research. Moving the dial. This is that precedent rule, and I don't expect you to write it down or memorize it or anything. It's on the net, and you can always ask me, but you can see. So if skull and crossbones appears from your classification, so it's toxic, your exclamation won't. That's that gradation. If the corrosive to skin and metal appears, again, that exclamation will not. Now, if you have the Starman for respiratory sensitization, you won't get the exclamation. So simplifications. And then we've got the transport pictogram from TDG or DOT, and you don't need to over placard. They are the same. They mean the same. If your shipment is placarded for TDG, it meets the requirements for GHS. So the GHS is once it gets to the work site, TDG is in transport, but there's also an overlap. Just imagine your pallet is sitting on your work site waiting to be dismantled. Just a word on sampling strategy. I spoke about TDG. This was one I did on TDG, but the beauty of TDG is they've put it in the regulation, just what it means to be, what you want to look for a sampling strategy. So you want a sample, you want a method, a specific apparatus based, and you work with the lab to find out what's best for your product. In oil and gas, there's a lot of different analyses, and you want to zero in on the ASTM methods that are correct for your product and where it is in the refined state or natural state. So you want sampling procedures in place. Oh, I can tell you stories about that. At one point, we had truckers taking my samples, and you can imagine they know how to work the controls, but they are not clean. So thankfully, we had our lab guys go out and take it according to a procedure. And operations guys are great too, but yeah, I guess fully trained truckers would, but our truckers, yeah, they were just doing it because I asked. Frequency definitely drives consistency and lets you catch when there's a upset, but it also lets you determine whether there's a tendency to, and then you can stop sampling or dial back your sampling once you see a trend. And that's just scientific practice, right? And quality control. Well, I'll say that again and again. So I may have repeated myself here. Classification, sampling and classification prior to shipping. These are important for TDG purposes. Sample as close to the place that you're going to capture it for selling. But as you can imagine, if you're doing an SDS for your systems products, you want to do that. Just make a bit of strategy around where you're taking your samples. So where the interface is with the people and the exposure. Sample in appropriate containers. Some of them need to be evacuated. Some of them need to be acid inside. The lab will send you the right containers. And often, some of these remote areas, they'll send a lab technician to take your sample. Procedure for collecting samples, like I said, there was no procedure for my truck drivers. Accredited laboratory, look for that. Some of these are remote sites. We have what we have. Sometimes we had the equipment on site partially, like pH and things like that. Percent flammables on site, and so we could use that. But other things get sent out. Look for an accredited laboratory. That's important for your quality control. And I've said it before, document. Quality control, laboratory that has experience. This was around crude analysis. National accreditations include CALA and SEC. AIHA does accreditations for things like asbestos and hygiene samples. Company representative, I've said this before, you know your substance, and often you'll know your regulations well too. Oh goodness, one of our clients had SDS written overseas in Asia, and they didn't have a sense of the TDG, so they had to rework their SDS such that it met Canadian regulations. So it's one thing to read a regulation, and it's other to be under that regulation. You just have a better understanding of what is necessary. So work with the laboratory, ask them about the analysis, and again, push back and say, you understand your product, so make sure you get the right tests for your product. Standardized procedures, I mentioned ASTM, BSMW, inline calibrated instruments are also work because, again, they're calibrated on a regular basis, and and they, yeah, they're meant for taking samples. And then, yes, definitely review the results. One of our clients as well, same thing. I'd like to spend a note on that is you don't, as a hygienist, we know we can't capture everything. As a SDS author, it's one sample, or maybe it's 3 samples. 3 samples make 3 points make a line. But if you can bring it together into certain areas, certain times of the year when your process is consistent, things like that, it helps you manage such that you're not taking a sample with every shipment. And yeah, so again, as long as you can capture anytime it comes out of your trending and show that you've got enough data to see the consistency of your product, that's where you want to be. Test results are compare your test results to previous results, and definitely investigate those differences. It's we have a natural tendency to just you get enough data to like throw one out. Oh, outlier. Well, yeah, take the time to figure out why that's an outlier. I've got a thing on that too. I was same thing, had my results, and the flammability went off the charts. We had a whole train full of crude heading down to the Gulf of Mexico, and it got down there, and our results showed that it had changed its packing group. So I was on the weekend writing up a new SDS to get it down because they wouldn't unload the shipment, the whole train. And a train, if you know, only has a certain window to stay at the port. And so they'll return your train full, and and then you got to receive your product back. And that's just not optimal. Anyway, so because I was able to figure that out, I tracked it back to that investigation. Turns out they bought a different type of diluent to mix with that bitumen dilbit. And yeah, I was able to alert the safety, process safety people. They didn't realize that they were using a different supplier for their diluent. And they had to do their investigation and make sure that the whole system, pressurized, the vessels, were okay with that change. So it was kind of a bit slip up, but somebody found it, and we were able to control any further damage. There was no damage, but having that train sit there was probably considered damage. This is a busy slide. I just wanted to let you know that for one of our clients, we did an investigation of the GHS implementation over different jurisdictions. So if you have, if you're writing SDSs or shipping product into China, Europe, or UK, I can share this with you. But big one was Canada, US, and I'll show you the comparisons just so you get a sense of perspective. Here's the different legislations. So in Canada, we have WHMIS, and but in other countries they call it different things. Down in the States, we're governed by Health Canada. Down there, it's OSHA. They call theirs the HAZCOM standard. And yeah, transport information comes from Transport Canada. Down there, it's DOT. Pesticides are exempt on both sides of the border. They fall under the Pest Control Acts. And so these pesticides and herbicides, many agricultural products, okay, I think I'm back. Are you guys still there?
Yep, we're here.
Oh,
We're here. I just put messages on the chat.
okay, where was I? I'm pretty close to being done. Let me share. I don't know what happened.
You started the last slide sort of after where you compared Canada, US, China, in the EU.
Thank you. Okay, so.
And then you moved on to one more slide right here. That's correct.
Good. Well, that was good. I just started spinning and then I was out. Low system resources. That's probably, oh, Sorry about that. What can I do? I'll just keep moving and we'll hope that it stays steady. So just Canada, US. So SDS is for pesticides, and Transport Canada, DOT is their equivalent. Herbicides, pesticides, agricultural products. They're coming aboard with DHS. They haven't accepted it. So they understand that there's you'll see better and better SDSs, I imagine, as we progress. Again, more updating. This is important. Suppliers and importers are allowed a period of 90 days when they find out new data. This, yeah, we've seen they want to regulate this a bit tighter, and just write this down and aim for that. You don't want to be caught in there. When you've got new data, make sure you're working on updating that SDS. Like I said, I work the weekend. Anyway, so, and then 180 days for labels. You can see US has a similar thing. It's just worded differently, 3 months, 6 months to update. Labels in Canada and SDSs need to be available in both English and French. And I've come across that too. I didn't feel comfortable writing French SDSs. And so that's when we went outsourced. And so Deerfoot does help with, and one of our clients, same thing, looking for Danish SDSs. So yeah, that may be when you reach out for help and to a registered author. And then as you can see, in the US, they only need the SDS in English. But if your workforce is, you can see this, their OSHA site is translated into Spanish. So that's the thing. If your workforce has a predominant language, you need to serve your workforce. And so you'd be looking for SDSs in Spanish in that particular case. But we have clients that we have our website. We put in a bunch of different languages because, yeah, it wasn't just Spanish. They have I want to say Tagalog, but different different languages, and you'll let us know if there's one that you want to cater to for your workforce. Supplier identifiers. This is a big one to know and understand that in Canada, your SDS needs to include a Canadian address and phone number for the Canadian supplier. In the US, same. So you can, if you're building an SDS for both sides of the border, you'll want to include one for each of those, identification for each of those. A good thing to know is classification cutoffs. So when you're building a GHS SDS, the threshold for classification for carcinogens is 0.1%. And then the threshold for other health hazards is 1%. The physical and the environmental have different thresholds. And what I spoke about, the flow chart will help you with that. But as you can imagine, there are certain things that are harmful under 0.1%, and consider H2S as one of them. So yeah, many of our clients will put, and Deerfoot clients will put H2S in their hazard warning, even if it's below 0.1%. And again, that's serving the worker, but a consideration outside of. Hazards not otherwise classified. Think of these as your combustibles, combustible dusts, and things like that. So anything that falls through the cracks of classification, they have allowances. In Canada, they break them down into physical hazards and health hazards not otherwise classified. In the US, they just have the one bucket, and then the corresponding pictogram for that is the exclamation mark, because they don't really know what's going to fall into that. It just gives room for growth as well. Exemptions. I just wanted to, again, a lot of words on this slide, but and I'm not an expert on HMRA and confidential business information. I didn't want to say CBI, but our system, our software helps with that. And there is a process in Canada, less so in the US. You can call anything proprietarial, and you just need to be able to defend it. In Canada, you actually need a HMRA number. And once you apply for that number, you can mask the CAS number, the chemical identity, or the actual concentrations. And I've used this, the prescribed concentrations and you can use prescribed concentrations as well if it's a natural product, and you aren't always certain that it's going to be 10%, 20%, 30%. So that helps, those buckets. Final info check, just again reiterate that once you determine your classification, it impacts other sections. So section 2 needs to match with section 3, section 3 needs to match with 11 and 12, section 2 also 9, and the H&P statements need to correspond with sections 7 and 8, storage and handling and stability. I have a list of principal references, and let me know if you're interested in having a copy of that. You'll see GHS, the purple books in there, the Chemical Hazard Communication Organization. They were also part of the registry, that AIHA registry. The PubChem is great for getting information for your SDS authoring. ECHA is a European inventory, and the ERG guide when you're working through the TDG sections, the transportation sections. You've heard me talk about the registry. This is where it's at. That's what it looks like. Developed by AIHA and Chemical Hazard Communication. And they have a book of knowledge, and there's different consulting is also on that list. That's my information and a cue for me to ask for your questions. And I think you just need to chat. I have one in the chat. Oh, maybe I've lost anything else in the chat. Sorry, guys, because I was kicked out. I have nothing in my chat.
I don't see anything in the chat either.
Any questions? I did go through a lot, and feel free to reach out to me directly to explain anything. We didn't talk about branding, rebranding. I've been through that too. Acquisitions and divestitures. We acquired a big Conoco bunch of assets, and just being able to review all their SDSs and match them with our current SDSs, and or if they had ones that were specific to their operations, then rebranding them. And so that do recommend reviewing them, but if rebranding is all you can do, just make sure in that disclaimer that that's all you've done. You've rebranded or merged. And then, but again, making sure you've got it on the list to review from a top-down health and safety perspective at some point. If you've got someone doing your SDSs and you're suspicious of their classifications and such, it's probably your conscience. We've had clients the same. I've had the SDS, and I've called some of the people I've worked before and said, hey, do you realize there's something wrong with your SDS? And they're like, I thought so. And they just needed an extra push. Like I said, feel free to push back on your suppliers and to get the latest to greatest, or to have changes as if they've created this, they can stand by their classifications and their wording. Anybody, don't want to use the word challenge, but yeah, we're all looking for a better product. Sign up for our newsletter. Maureen would want to say that, and that's probably how you got here as well. Yeah, happy you could join me.